Somehow we are not live on Periscope because Periscope has decided to cause a problem. Bear with us, everybody else. All right, now we're live on all platforms. Wonderful. And let's start over. Here we go. Hello, personal productivity enthusiasts and community. Welcome to Anything But Idle, the Productivity News podcast. Today's show is brought to you by W3C Web Services. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith.
And I'm Augusto Pinaud.
And we're your hosts for Anything But Idle. This is episode 35, and we are going to be covering Productivity and Technology News in Review 2020. We're recording this on December 21st, 2020, and each week we cover the productivity news headlines of the week. And to do that, we usually bring on some panelists. And today we have one panelist to help us talk about all things in the personal productivity and technology space. So today we're bringing Jay Miller onto the show. Jay is a developer advocate at Elastic based in San Diego, California, a multi-potentialite. I'm hoping I'm getting that right. Jay enjoys finding unique ways to merge his fascination with productivity, automation, and development to create tools and content to serve the tech community. Welcome to Anything But Idle, Jay.
Hey, glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Wonderful. And so with that, this week's theme, what I thought we would do, Augusto and I thought we would do, is to walk us through the stories of the year. As many can kind of figure out, 2020 was a little bit unusual. It was a challenging year for a lot of us, and it was unusual in many regards. But we've had a lot of productivity and technology news that's happened. A lot of things have occurred this year. And so, Augusto, you want to kick us off with what you believe is kind of the biggest story this year?
The virtual shows. As a person who started his life doing sales, I remember the big shows and I remember the Apple event and all these events being big deals. When the beginning of 2020 started and we got COVID and all this, what is going to happen with these shows? And we saw Apple, we saw Google, we saw Samsung, we saw Microsoft going into these virtual events from good to better, because really there was, but we are going to remember only the good ones that got to better. There was some that were not that great, but hey, it's what happened. But if even we were able to experience how Apple did the first one, then it got better and better, even to the big house, and Google did theirs, and Samsung did an incredible job with their events too. So that was something that I don't think any of us will have considered before 2020, that it was going to be an option to watch this event live this way, everybody live, instead of having some people who was going to be there, and we were really jealous about it.
I mean, as someone who, like, my job as a developer advocate is to go to shows like this, go to conferences, go to all of the types of meetups and things like that. I think we look at the larger shows for inspiration on how we can do things. And this was like the hardest one, because at the end of the day, like, no one's got the production budget of Apple, Google, and Samsung. So for us, it's like, okay, how can we take these massive productions that they're doing and downscale them for the local, meetup, or, the online conference that, for a lot of these companies, a lot of these foundations and organizations, they rely on these events to stay afloat until the next year. And so it's like super important, but yet we're all like rolling with the punches and doing some crazy stuff. And honestly, that's kind of been like the coolest thing for me to notice, is that presentations changed. I saw developer conferences where people were doing like scripted talks and almost like full featured production sets. And I mean, they look like, everyone's favorite high school musical play, but like at the same time, it was causing us to think differently and to do things completely unheard of in terms of presenting whether you were presenting, for your favorite programming language, your favorite productivity tool at a meetup, or whether you were introducing a brand new chip architecture, as in the case of Apple.
Yeah, it's certainly the case that COVID-19 and the proliferation of the downstream consequences of that created all kinds of changes in the way in which we work and how we manage our personal lives. And I think that ends up being kind of the story of the year all told. I know that, Augusto and I produced Productivity Summit in 2019, and my mission behind that whole concept was to have a live remote conference dedicated to personal productivity. And to see us come into 2020, and we ended up having to just say, you know what, because of COVID, we're not going to do it this year. In and amongst all of the other events that were happening in various stages, right? There were people who were doing pre-recorded things, small things, very big things. And I just don't want to be in that space. It's just a very different environment to be in that while everything was kind of happening. And so we're coming back next year, in a different, bigger way, hopefully, with Productivity Summit 2021. And it's been really good because a whole bunch of new technology came on board to be able to compensate for COVID-19. And so now all of a sudden I have this like smorgasbord of opportunities in terms of technologies to use next year that I don't think we would have had this not happen. So like a little bit of silver lining there in that way. Augusto, let's talk about some of the bigger ticket items that happened because of that. And let's start really with, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, Slack, you name it, the proliferation of virtual meeting software.
And I think that's a big thing that nobody can ignore. At the beginning, I said this year ago, 12 months ago, if I wanted to talk to, or a client wanted to talk to you, or you wanted to talk to anybody, you were a text or a phone call away. Now, all these same 5-minute things is, let's jump quickly on a Zoom or a Meet or a Teams call quickly. Even I've been impressed. Christmas coming and we're not traveling, so we're not going to see family. And it's been really interesting seeing not the youngest, but the older generation. Okay, my parents looking for, but we can do the dinner over Zoom. And you're like, no, we're not going to have dinner over Zoom. But for them, we have been doing Zoom dinner with my father-in-law every Saturday since Father's Day, because my father-in-law, to tell the story, he don't use a computer, he don't have a computer, he dictates to somebody that type an email to you. And when he discovered for Father's Day Zoom, he went and bought a computer so just he can do Zoom. He has an iPad, so he can do Zoom with us every weekend and have dinner with us. But for him, as was my mother-in-law and my parents, they want to have Christmas together. So they are okay passing that barrier. And it sounds like, okay, whatever, we do it over Zoom. But it is a gigantic leap that a lot of people did into being comfortable into this talk. People who you will not have been able to convince them to do FaceTime, before COVID, now are talking to you about, let's do a Zoom. And we were talking about this, and my mother said, I read that Zoom is going to have no time limits during Christmas. You're like, wow. But
yeah, that 40-minute time limit is a savior in many families. So
yes.
I refuse to do any Zoom calls with family members at this point. It's like, I think, we talk about the idea of new technology coming in and changing how we've worked, especially now that most of us have gone remote and we're having to do a lot of things differently. It's interesting the number of meetings that have just crept into our overall work ecosystem, to the point where now my team is actively trying to reduce the number of meetings that we're having. It's like, hold on, pause. When's the next meeting? Next week? Can we push it out another 2 weeks? Okay, great. And just testing to see what we're able to do. But one of the things that I noticed as we're talking about all of these different technologies, there were two that I noticed were missing from our original notes. And I think it's interesting that, to me, one is an up and coming product, and one, what happened? The one that's up and coming is Discord. Many of
All
us
the
found
kids.
well, and that's the thing, is a lot of us were saying all the kids. I sat in multiple conferences this year that chose to use Discord as their unified collaborative tool. I'm in Discord every single day for work, not for business. And it's interesting that even earlier this year, and I'll put a link in our chat here, we saw like Discord rebrand and reshift their focus to be one that was more towards community, not towards gamers. And it was something that we like, once you started seeing it, you started hearing other people that you would never think knew what Discord was now saying like, oh yeah, hey, we have a Discord channel where we can talk and share, tropes and just funny stuff, and we can even talk business. And the other one that was in there that wasn't in there was Skype. And I feel like beforehand, when people thought of calling via the internet, they thought of Skype. Well, just hit me up on Skype or something like that. I feel like Microsoft really missed the mark when Zoom came in. And as you mentioned, Augusto, like you have family members that have never owned a computer. You have family members that intentionally do not use a computer, that decided, you know what, I'm going to go get a computer for video conferencing. And had this happened 3 years ago, had this happened 4 years ago, Skype would have been in position for this to be the only thing out there available. And now it feels like they've almost reached irrelevance, and now Zoom has taken their place. So I just wonder, like, what are y'all's thoughts on the idea of like communities that weren't focused on doing business or, the community space now getting involved, but then also the businesses that were available for them kind of bowing out? We just saw Slack get acquired by Salesforce. So like, that's a big name and a big company to put behind what we thought was going to be the darling child of collaborative talk. And now it seems like they're going to be doing whatever Salesforce has intended for them. What are y'all's thoughts on like just the shifting of the landscape?
Well, it is interesting, and as you were mentioning Skype, you make me think. When my first daughter was born, 2008, we got my father-in-law a Skype phone that has the camera. Okay, it was the first one, so we're talking about ancient technology, but he was able to do that, and that one he didn't care. And what the difference was for him was the pandemic, that he could not do a lot of the social life. I think that was maybe the element that many of us didn't consider. It was not necessarily the work part. The people who needed to work and communicate this way was going to do it for good or for bad. I think what this video technologies turn into is into that socialization part. That was it turned into, now you can play board games and things that it's not that you could not do before, is that you did not thought the possibility to do them before. And as you said, it's changed the way we approach and the way we're using the same tools for better.
Some of the things that happened this year, I think, precipitated the movement of a lot of these companies to make strategic choices because of political reasons. And so I feel like even withstanding the fact that Facebook is currently, basically getting the federal government and all of these state AGs coming down on them for purchasing WhatsApp and Instagram years ago, here goes another purchase of a fairly large organization with high valuation that is not Salesforce necessarily buying a competitor, but buying into a market. And the curiosity there is whether or not regulators are going to start looking at these deals as to whether or not the purchase of these technologies are for users, are for market share, and whether or not that actually has an impact on their ability to grow going forward, which I would imagine that there's some need for us at least in the United States, to cap some of the growth on these very large technology firms so that we can have greater diversity and really greater equity across the board, both in the startup founder space, but also in the development of productivity technologies that provides all of the tools that we need in order to be productive. And like looking at it through that productivity and technology lens is the thing that I think is really most unique about all of these, because the idea behind like Salesforce buying Slack, for example, really does provide greater productivity for Salesforce. They're gonna really be able to do more with Slack internally, but are the organizations that are integrated with Slack that are also CRMs, are they really truly going to be able to now buy into Slack as an organization? And that's a huge decision that a lot of them have to make, that because they were like, oh, this is so cool. It's the cool Silicon Valley tech, software that we all use for communication and project collaboration. Now it's not, because people have to decide whether or not they're going to be bought into Salesforce as a whole. From like a different kind of angle, my thought is that Skype, Microsoft really put the nail in that coffin themselves, right? Because they said they were going to be shutting down Skype in deference to Microsoft Teams, and that process seems to be still going forward. So as of July of next year, it seems like Skype is going to be gone, and all of the pieces of Skype will be inside of Microsoft Teams, unless I'm missing something. I think that's probably why Skype wasn't pushed stronger. Although then Microsoft in a recent Windows update pushed a Skype little toolbar icon. So I'm not quite sure why they keep like cropping up Skype in different places. But it seems as though to me that Microsoft wants Teams to be that tool. And even with the effect that now, they've got this free tier of Microsoft Teams for people to use in personal and family life, it's starting to feel to me like Google and their communications technologies, where they feel a little bit scattershot and not quite knowing where they're going with, it's like, yes, here goes Duo. Oh, here goes Google Chat. Oh, wait, here goes Meet. Oh, wait, here goes, and they just keep throwing things at the fan and hoping something sticks. But it all just keeps getting sliced up and thrown around the room. And so I'm curious what Microsoft's ultimate end play here is. I think it's still Teams. I think it's, building that technology out. But they probably have a strong enough brand with Skype that they want to continue to like pull some of that in. I thought they were actually going to maybe use the Xbox platforms for more video streaming stuff, because the kids already use it, and not just the kids. I mean, lots of adult gamers. So all of you who are adult gamers, they're using it also. I know I have lots of siblings, and I know several of my siblings who are using those kinds of gaming platforms. So it has the technology. I think that's why Discord seems like a natural fit, also, right? If you're doing a lot of that kind of streaming work in the gaming space, it makes a lot of sense. So, what are some of the other big stories of this year?
Well, what continue is our dear friends of Google, and there's a couple of, there are more than a couple of things on Google, but I think there is a couple that were really important to mention. One was how G Suite becomes Workspace, and there has been a lot of love and not love and many other kind of comments about this transformation and the icons, and if they're pretty or not pretty or whatever. But I think regardless of this, it was a good change. I agree with what they did, changing some of those icons and make it a little bit more consistent to a whole thing, and to make it, even that they are technically product, giving the impression to the people that they are now a one thing. I think with the way they were before on G Suite was more like, okay, we throw all these things into a box. They're all different, but you can work with them together. And now they're trying to produce a product that it looks like this product has all these components. And I think that's really, really positive.
Yeah, well, they changed a lot of the interface in order to be able to bring the pieces together. And that's why it's Workspace now, as opposed to just being a suite of products. I mean, the name change matched the new modality of working that we're now seeing.
I think there's two things on here. I think that one, the fact that to be frank, I feel like Google, in terms of office productivity, has been getting their lunch fed to them like for the last few years. I think Office 365 is just a more preferred method to larger enterprise companies, an area that Google really wants to get into. I think that in terms of the things that at least my generation, like the millennials out there that are now becoming into middle management, a little bit of senior management, they're able to make a lot of these decisions. We all grew up having to use Microsoft Word. So for us to have that initial thought pattern, we go there. In terms of the next generation, I think there is a lot of opportunity there. The Chromebook generation was a thing. I know a lot of students now are using a lot of the Google productivity suite as a whole. And I think that this is a play to set up for that generation entering the workforce. And when we think of tools like Gmail, Google Calendar, all of those things, I think of personal tools. Even when you had G Suite, it was like, well, I have a business license, but it's still kind of just me, maybe a few other people. Like, if they want to get out of that space and get deeper into companies that require their own special licensing, then they have to make these changes. They have to shift the conversation away from Gmail is my personal email and Outlook is where I go to do business. And it really does need to be this. I go to Google, Workspace, and I have my calendar. I have Outlook in a browser basically, and I'm able to do all of my things from there. I feel like that was the big thing that is pushing them in that direction. I feel like they lost the last generation, and they're really trying to set up for a better battle on the next one.
That's really interesting because I agree with you, and I didn't understood why they took so long into consolidated on those words that you're describing, because for a lot of people think, and a lot of people think, oh yeah, Google is my personal, but I go Outlook for work, and it's really a missing opportunity. But I hope now that more and more businesses are getting into that and getting into Google as their platform of choice, I don't know if I think the line with Outlook was, okay, you can use anything and use Outlook, and Microsoft is been making that line a little bit more bold. So, oh no, if you are coming here, we want you to live in the Microsoft ecosystem, not into your external things. Yes, you can connect them, but really come and live in our Microsoft ecosystem. And I think that's going to start creating a little bit of a division that will produce in the middle opportunities for others.
And to be clear, last year, like no one would have said, I want to use Outlook. Like that was never the conversation. It was always like, my business uses Outlook. Our company uses Outlook. We have to use Outlook. Like we don't have a choice. Now Outlook actually looks good. Like Office 365 is usable. Some might argue that, but it is a lot better than where it was when it was like I could never imagine, 2 years ago saying working for a company that's like, oh yeah, no, we just use all Google products now. Like if you weren't in Silicon Valley, like that just wasn't a thing. It was like you use Outlook, you have, enterprise licenses, and you have to just figure out like how you're going to deal with that and move on and have your Gmail accounts for all your personal stuff and your work account at, jmiller@whatever.com to handle all of your business stuff.
And now, I mean, the thing that I think Microsoft did really well was they finally brought Outlook on the Mac parity, more feature consistency. I mean, before I would constantly have to say, yeah, I'm sorry, that feature is not quite available on the Mac to a lot of my higher end clients, and they are using Macs, and they're in an Exchange environment, they're in a 365 environment, but they're not able to use all of the features of their tools because they're not on Windows. And finally Microsoft heard the cry and finally got that going. I think a little bit of it was also their mobile apps. I think their mobile apps have really risen to the level
Much better.
Yes. So I think that's all a positive across the board.
Yeah, and we need to remember again, now they're finally getting there, but it took them a while to really get those mobile apps to that level. At the beginning, they were not there.
Yeah, and I'm in the state where I'm reviewing all of the various productivity apps for email, calendar, and otherwise in my system for the new year. And I always like to kind of kick the tires, but I've had an ongoing concern about managing email and having an application for those that manages across. And in years past, I've used Newton Mail, and I was burned. When they shut down. Yeah, exactly. They shut down. Right, exactly. So they're still probably the best Microsoft, Apple, Google product out there for this functionality. So if anybody watching or listening has suggestions, please send them my way. But I'm almost thinking that Outlook ends up being the best tool for this. And since I have a 365 license, I can do that. But it's one of those things where I'm like, do I really want to re-steep myself in the Outlook space? And I train on Outlook, and I do all kinds of things with Outlook with my clients, but I don't use it myself, and that's a purposeful decision. And now I'm having to make that, if Google Workspace had an email application for the desktop, I'd be there in a heartbeat.
Stay on purpose.
Yeah, right.
Did you just willingly invite your audience to email you about why their favorite email application is the one you should go with?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, you're a bold person.
I get the emails. It's okay. I enjoy hearing from all of you. So I think this is one of those things though where we will see applications like Woven that has created to be a layer on top of Google, as well as the Microsoft 365 calendar. We're going to see more of these applications coming into 2021. But I think in 2020, I think it was really good to see this crop of new applications. There are several. I mean, from Superhuman to what's the other one that I recently came across? And then we have Hey that launched in the process with the Basecamp folks. And so we have a whole ecosystem of people trying to capitalize on email and managing email well in a kind of virtual environment. Here, it looks like Jamie's asking, have any of you tried Hey Mail from Basecamp? And as I just mentioned, yes, I have. And it's, as it notes on its website, it's a highly opinionated platform. It's its own email service that by itself kind of removes it from my desired list of things to use. But I can see where a lot of people will want to use it. What are others' opinions of Hey?
Tried it. Nah. I mean, this to me, and hi Jamie, I have feelings. My biggest complaint with Hey is not what it is trying to do, it is why it is trying to do it. I feel like it's trying to solve a problem that ultimately just kind of hides a problem and doesn't actually solve it. I think instead of teaching people good email practices, it instead tries to force, as you mentioned, opinionated practices. I tried it. I've learned that my systems for managing my email have kept me sane, so there was no reason to introduce a bunch of systems that completely changed how I had to do email into it. So if you're not sure how to work your email, by all means, give it a shot. If you've already got an email system in place that seems to be working for you, if you try to change it, I think you're going to find more problems than you'll find solutions.
I, for one, try an app called Spike, that it works on the Mac, it works on my iPad, and it basically tried to turn email into a more text-based communication, up and down or left and right,
like a chat.
Like a chat, right? And it is fantastic. It is the only missing link to that thing to turn into my main email address is the integration of their notes and the task with my other, with external. Because the problem is, it's a bucket and it's tied up in there, and you cannot get stuff easily out of that. And I have learned enough years doing this game that if you don't let me get my info out, I don't want to put my info in.
Well, I will say this: if the Spike folks are watching, please let me turn off all of the other rubbish in the interface. I mean, such a great application, such a great opportunity with Spike, and the fact that you can connect multiple email services to the platform. They're pushing out new features, and they're really doing a bang up job. And I give them great credit. And that's one of the other tools in that ecosystem. Among Superhuman and Spike and Newton and so on and so forth. Great independent product. My biggest problem with it is that it's got a lot of visual clutter, and so I just really can't deal with. And when I'm dealing with email, I want to put the blinders on and deal with it. I'm a high email traffic environment, so I need to be able to pound through hundreds of emails a day. I cannot have you, showing me files and bothering me about, these other little calendar doodads and, like all of that stuff in the environment really does. And they've done a pretty good job of giving you more ability to put things away. But I want nothing in my environment when I'm processing my email. And so, if you guys are watching or listening, please just let me turn it all off. I don't need your opinionation in the software. I need just email, reply, forward, delete. That's what I need in my system. Not even new message, because I don't need to send emails in your program. I just need to reply, forward, and delete. There was actually the Baden folks. They had the Gmail game. The Boomerang folks at Baden, they created that email game, and that was one of the best tools ever. I really, really enjoyed it. Jamie's asking, what is the one killer feature which is missing from the majority of email service, in your opinion? Who wants to take that one first?
I mean, is there a feature that's missing? I think that the thing that we tend to forget is that email is one of the oldest internet technologies that is still around. And that is a good thing. It's very robust. It's very simple. And the things that we've noticed have been problems have been taken care of by individual systems. I think that there's an attention issue, however, that is a bigger problem. And that's the thing that I think that companies like Hey are trying to address. I use a tool called SaneBox for that very reason, where not even for the fact of the things in my inbox being like important or not important, but just having the ability to quickly triage the stuff that I'm getting in on a regular basis, have it in folders so that I can go in once a day, only once a day, unless I'm actually going back and trying to find some information, and then which I think Google's email system is fine for that. And then I just go through, process my new email, deal with it once and once only, and then I'm done. I don't think there needs to be a killer feature for essentially words that are going from one person to another. I would counter that by saying, what's the one killer feature with sending a letter that needs to be added to the US postal system? Like when we finally hack that, then I think we can turn to email.
I will say though, the US Postal Service adding the scanning feature so you can see the mail before it shows up, that was a killer feature.
That's amazing. And if they only had a spam filter, like it'd be the best.
It is. If you watch the season finale of The Mandalorian, they talk about a certain figure in there, and they say, "Oh no, this is the third generation, and we figured it out. We took the human was the weakest link in all this." And I think this applies perfectly to the answer Jamie is looking for.
Well, hopefully, those are no spoilers. I have not yet finished The Mandalorian.
That is not a spoiler. I'm just saying what we need for email is to remove the weakest link. That is the human.
Yeah, I think. Again, going back to Jay's point here, I think that the kind of if you want to call it killer feature, the best features of email is the ability to reduce garbage email you do not want. And I think that's one of the features in Hey that I actually really like. And there have been various services that have tried this over the years. In essence, a permission only based email system where email is not received unless it actually is something that you accept. And this is, again, kind of the same as the U.S. Postal Service, and that's why I continue to talk about email as it is like a piece of mail being received, just faster, in the sense that I can send email to anyone, but that doesn't mean I have to reply to all of them. If I get a piece of mail and I don't like it, I could throw it in the trash, and no one cares like it maybe the person who sent it cares, but there's not really an understanding in email that you don't deserve a reply from me just because you sent me an email. And just like if you send me a letter, you don't deserve a reply from me. It's just not a reality. And that's how I've always operated, and that's how I always will operate, because I get a lot of junk email and I get a lot of junk mail in the mail, as well. And I've done as much as I can to get rid of those things. One of the other things that I think is really powerful in email is the ability to create some level of templating of the email system. And most of the major companies, Google and Microsoft, they have the ability for you to have templates, whether that be email signatures or a full template system in there. It would be really nice if the protocol itself allowed for that, and it doesn't, and that's fine. I think that otherwise, email as its own method, as its own protocol, I think works. I mean, it's worked since the 1960s. So I think that we don't really need that many more features in email. I think the various applications that give us functionality, for example, I would love for a feature within an email client to surface tasks, so that it could understand that an email was an action-based email, and then be able to grab that using either GPT-3 or some other function to be able to then write the task out in my task management system. That would be really cool, but that's on the client side. That's not necessarily in the email service itself. The service, I just want to deliver my emails stably, consistently, and reliably. So I hope that kind of answers the question, at least from our opinions. Go ahead, Jay.
I was going to say, last thing, if there was one feature that I would ask for, and I think that's granular notification on email replies. Like, there are some emails, and I will say, full disclosure, I'm a superhuman user. So yes, they have kind of that one marketing tool that every marketing company has used from the dawn of time, which is a tracking pixel to tell whether or not you've opened an email or not. I think one thing that could be done to fix that is to make it so that I could easily group, kind of like how SaneBox does with like sane no replies or sane CC. If I could just say, if I message this person, when they message me back, I want a notification within this certain time frame, or I want a notification from all of this list of people, but not from this other list of people, or people that are not on this list. It can go and it can wait for me to process it when I do my normal processing. I think that's the one feature that I would really like from email that I haven't really seen outside of like your traditional VIP list.
And it is interesting because one of the things when I work with clients that I told, again, going back to the human factor, one of the things that I work with my clients is, where did you check email and stop checking email everywhere else? Because one of the things I found is people open email on their phone, open email on their tablets, open email on the laptop, open email on the desktop. That I thought it was a discussion. I mean, I understand productivity experts were discussing this 2003, but this is what mainstream is now. VIP only on their phone, everything else open when you get to your laptop or your tablet or whatever you use to process email. And it sounds like, but that discussion is still real. And we productivity enthusiasts thinking about 3 steps ahead, and a lot of people is finally getting to that issue. I understand it was discussed on the productivity people 10 years ago, but that is the reality. So some of these features are awesome, but they are 2030, not 2021.
2020.
I'm already done with 2020, so we are in 2021, my friend.
Just like this year, we're moving on.
All right. What are some of the other big stories that we have in the rundown, so we can move on, that you want to talk about?
Well, no. I want to talk about the Surface Duo.
Okay.
Because that was a surprise device for me. Okay. I live on an iPad. I live on a Mac. I consider that day that I bought that Mac a happy day. The first Mac, I I have zero interest on leaving my iOS ecosystem at this point. But I'm going to admit that that Microsoft Duo really got my attention to the point that I was this close to put my credit card and get one to play. So if it's not because I picked the wrong theme for 2021, that was not buying unnecessary technology junk, I will have that. But let's say something. We are recording this on December 21st, and there is only 10 days for that to be over.
I think you're in the same position of so many other people, though, where they said, oh, wow, that looks really interesting. Not interesting enough for me to buy immediately, but I will keep an eye out. And I think that ultimately that's, I don't want to say that Microsoft is, okay, I'll say it. Microsoft is losing this battle. In the foldable space, something that a lot of people thought was going to be the thing of 2020, which, yeah, they were off a little bit. A lot of other things happened. But the foldable space, you had Samsung doing one thing. You had all of these other companies, Huawei, Xiaomi, they all had these foldable phones and these foldable like archetypes. And then you had a big name, another big name like Microsoft say, we're going to do it differently. We're going to give you two screens. We're not going to give you like the one screen that's folded. We're going to really give you a tool that allowed you to have a really thick iPad mini in one hand or a normal sized iPad Pro if you opened it up. And at the end of the day, I don't think it really did what Microsoft wanted it to. And they have swung and missed so many times with hardware in the mobile industry. I'm just glad they didn't go with a Windows OS on it, and they said, okay, we're gonna do like an Android thing and slap Windows all over it. But I don't know. I think the Surface laptop is probably their best hardware device. I used one for several years.
Agreed.
But I think the more they're trying to play off of that with gimmicks, they're going to lose focus. Right now, Microsoft is a services and Surface product. And if they double down on that, and I guess Xbox too, that's a big thing. And GitHub, that's another big thing. Here's a problem. They have a lot of big things. And the more that they try to add to it with these little swings, the more it muddies up their reputation. They could have had a really good year this year. Microsoft Teams was great. Xbox Series 1, it seems to have missed a lot of the problems that the PlayStation's had, and it's been great. Their Xbox Game Pass apparently is a really good incentive for people to buy into that market. Azure services are increasing. They're winning on so many areas. The Surface Duo was a big loss. And I think that at the end of the day, they just need to stop trying and focus on the things that they're already doing so well and maintain that leadership position there.
I'll give the devil's advocate perspective, which is that a lot of these companies have to put their dip their toe in these waters to see what will stick. And in this particular case, I think that the reality is that for Microsoft to try an Android, two screen, foldable. It wasn't a phone, but it had a SIM card device. Let's call it device. Is not particularly that far of a reach. It didn't land in the market, and I don't think it landed because of its price point. It's just really overly priced. $1,500 for a two screen folding device. What I think is going to happen is akin to how Bill Gates walked out on stage with that touchscreen computer, way back in the day. I can't name a date here, but I'm thinking it was late 90s, and everybody laughed at him. And this is now a touchscreen laptop, and the idea of a foldable device that is multi use is now quite common. We have Chromebooks all over the place. We have laptops that do this. And so I really think that it's really important for us to remember that some of these, plays in the market is just to kind of like dip their toes in the water to kind of see whether or not things stick. And if they don't, it's really no harm, no fail for Microsoft. I mean, really, they're going to write that off on their balance sheet, and who cares? but I think it gives the Android market actually a lift, in the sense that Microsoft had to do a lot of work with the Android project to make that work. And now those features have been shown to work out in the wild. And even with a small user base using those things, they've gotten a lot of data back. And I think Microsoft is working really hard with their services to make 365 run really, really well across the Android ecosystem. And they want to make sure that continues to be the case, even to the effect that someday when you can, when everybody has, in the high-end market has 2 iPads and they want to turn their iPad into a keyboard, now a 2-screen concept, even on iPad OS versus Android, will then just be like kind of a natural, like, yeah, of course I would do that. I really see this having some bleed over effect into the market in those cases.
I think the sadder story from Microsoft here was that the Surface Studio 3 got delayed till 2021. To me, if they want to focus on a hardware product, Apple literally like jumped the shark with this like massive performance increase. And the thing that everyone was mad about was that you still couldn't touch the screen. You can run iPad apps on it, but you can't touch the screen. So Microsoft has solved this problem. They've given you this beautiful display on a clean interface with a built-in tablet support, a funky little dial thing for accessory love. And on top of all of that, you can touch the screen, the thing that people have been asking for so long. Digital creators want this so bad. We don't want 2 screens that fold up like a book. We want a really big surface that we can play on, and then take our Surface Pros and take them to the coffee shop once we're allowed to go into coffee shops again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Jamie's noting here that he's a .NET developer and he doesn't fully understand where Microsoft is going with their hardware. And he's a .NET dev who runs Linux as his daily driver. And so clearly, Microsoft isn't doing a very good job of communicating where they're going with their hardware. But I think that, again, it ends up being if their apps and their services work really well across the current ecosystem, which is really Android, Windows 10, 7, and then the iOS and Mac OS environment.
No longer 7. They dropped support on that.
Oh, well, no, they have they're still doing patches of security patches. So I consider that, so Windows 10 has now overtaken 7 as the dominant OS, right, in the Windows space. But there's still a lot of 7 users out there. Surprising to me, not, but there's still a lot of them out there.
Especially big corporations who have managed to get their own version of. They don't want to leave 7 yet.
Well, they've paid for that extended support cycle, right. So
as a veteran, I'm sure there are still Windows XP machines out there somewhere.
Not only that, I can guarantee you there is people not wanting to update. No, I don't want to update my XP. It worked great.
What fits into this conversation is I recently bought one of the Raspberry Pi 400s, and we're seeing more and more Linux devices coming into the market, even to the effect that we have Chromebooks now with Crostini now baked in. You're capable of just turning on a Linux distro in your Chromebook. We're going to see more and more of that kind of change the market maybe a little bit.
Was Raspberry Pi not on our list of things of 2020? Because I feel like they've won. They've won in my heart and in my wallet. I've got gadgets and gizmos for days.
Plenty.
Yeah, to me the 400 is the example of where, in my opinion, in terms of hardware, companies like Google and Microsoft, if they want to get into an area, they need to get into that area. There is a massive shift in focus in making compute cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. It started with Amazon with AWS services. In most places, if you can't afford an enterprise license from Microsoft and you don't have some type of crazy partnership with Google on the back end, you're running some type of AWS service. So in my opinion, if they want to work in an area that's getting cheaper and cheaper, they need to be looking at hardware that's going to fit an industry where we have electricity, we have internet connectivity becoming more and more prevalent across these smaller areas that have traditionally been underserved with projects like Project Loom and all of those things. We need to be getting not just Chromebooks, but like you said, Raspberry Pi 400s, some type of competing device. I think Nvidia launched their own like micro PC type competitive tool that's like $50. It's amazing that all of these other companies are positioning for that, but then you have these other companies that are trying to compete in the, I guess, luxury compute area that Apple has had a foothold, like a stronghold on. And in my opinion, I feel like that's just not the place where they're going to win. They're going to win by saying, sure, if you have the money to buy this fancy, iPad Pro and, an iMac and a $10,000 computer, like go the Apple route. But if you just need to get something done and you don't care how much it costs, get a Raspberry Pi 400. Get some type of Surface Book that caters to that audience. Get this, small system on a chip device where you can program and it's not going to break the bank.
Yeah, Jamie's noting that he's teaching, I'm guessing, brother or mother, a little on a little Python 3 on a Raspberry Pi 400, and I'm guessing this really leads the Raspberry Pi Foundation to the next natural point, which is probably a laptop form factor, and being able to put a screen on it so that you can bring that into kind of full scale use. We have also a whole bunch of e-ink readers that are running Android. I've seen some Android 9, Android 10 e-ink devices, and with just the implementation of a casing that includes a keyboard, you bring computing to a lot more people on a very, very low cost device. So I fully echo your sentiment, Jay. I think we have a lot of opportunity there. I will say, though, that Microsoft, Google, they want a part of the luxury market, and they're going to probably waste a lot of dollars trying to take a share of that, even if it's a small share, because then they get to showcase some splashy products to the executives that they want to showcase in their press releases. So I think they're going to probably continue to waste that money just for that purpose. There's a value to their shareholders in saying so and so uses our high end Surface Pro X.
But I think there is also a big difference. If we go back, with the stories, because I don't remember them, I did not buy any of those devices ever. When those, when the for the love of God, the name is escaping me. The cheap laptops that were like the laptops at 10 inches, the netbooks. Thank you. Yeah. When the netbooks came out, they were cheap. Yeah, they were, but they were not fully capable. I mean, they were slow. Some people can make it work, but they were not really a substitute for a computer. I mean, it was something you could use. One of the difference now is that any of these Chromebooks, even if you go and get the Raspberry Pi and you spend another $100 in Amazon, you can now turn that thing into a touchscreen, tablet style. Yeah, maybe think it may not be as refined as an iPad is, but it will be a tablet touchscreen, running on a Raspberry Pi. So you can now go for that little amount of money and really get something that is incredibly powerful. That's one of the things that has been really interesting. Even when we see mobile phones, the mobile phones, a lot of people has more powerful mobile phones than their laptops. They work all day. So that also, I think it's a big, big difference, where I think as Microsoft is doing certain things wrong, that's where they're doing right on making their things leveled to, doesn't matter which device you bring to the game, you are going to finally find the same level, because that has been a complaint. Not that I have any interest on bring product Microsoft against to my life, but that was always a complaint. When I work with my clients, that's a complaint, that they can do certain things on a platform but not do them in the other one.
In terms of compute, it's because it is getting so much cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, the services are getting better. You no longer need a $2,000 gaming, rig. You can build one. For a long time, you could build one for sub $1,000 and have a really strong system. But now you can take advantage of things like NVIDIA Shield. I think NVIDIA Shield is the right one, or NVIDIA, some product that they'll shutter in 5 years. But sorry, that was a dig. But I think that as more and more compute goes online, we have apps and services that now it doesn't matter what you're running them on. Like you said, Electron is a thing, unfortunately. Like you can build your code for any platform, Windows, Mac, um, the web, Linux, and it's all on one code base. And again, unfortunately, because some of those products are very, very intensive on resources. But the promising thing behind that is you can offload a lot of that resource into cloud compute, and now your computer is literally a screen that unlocks some other computer that's much more powerful than the one you're sitting at. So if you can use that, to me, the hardware is going to not matter as much in the future as we continue to push more and more things to cloud environments with cloud compute and with cloud servers. And we just saw that with Amazon announcing that you can get Mac Mini compute usage for AWS now. Like, it's insane. Everything is moving to the cloud. Literally, the thing you're holding in your hand is just a portal to all of that information as you need it.
Yeah, so Jamie's noting that ARM-based SoCs are the future of low-cost level computing environments. He's basically, kind of noting what you're saying in relation to ARM, and that's why Apple is now going to the ARM-based Apple Silicon. And we've heard this now. Intel's kind of having a bit of a bloodletting here. Microsoft is reportedly going to be moving to moving off of that and going to the ARM as well. So we're going to see more and more of this happen. And my point here, from a productivity perspective, as we are building out new technologies and thinking about it from that perspective, how we're going to use those technologies, if what you're holding is in essence a thin client which is accessing cloud computing, then form factor becomes the differentiator. And that becomes like the quality of what you're holding is important still to the effect of the form factor. Because for me, I'm thinking about it from the perspective that if I want to have a terminal, a client that's going to work well for me, I need it to be in such a form factor that allows me to be most productive. And that may be a smaller screen for me and a larger screen for Augusto. It may mean that I want my screen to be curved and, ginormous. And that may mean for Augusto, he wants a tablet that's flat. So and touchscreen, right? So like all of those pieces come into an interesting kind of opportunity, I think, for a lot of people who want to get into the market and do different things in that space. Jamie's noting here, it's interesting to him that we've gone from thin clients of the 60s and 70s, which required a server in order to run applications, to smart desktops, and back again with AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. You name it. I'm adding Google Cloud because of my bias. So, but yeah. So I think that's really, really interesting. I want to move our conversation along, lest we be here all evening, to the productivity apps of 2020. And so I guess this is a good time for disclosures. One, I am the Google Small Business Advisor for Productivity, hence my bias. I try not to bring too much of it to the table, but there is clearly a point of reference there. And I am an Evernote certified consultant, as well as the Evernote regional leader, one of the Evernote regional leaders for North America. And Evernote put out their new applications this year, the Evernote version 10. So you can continue to use Evernote Legacy, which is their old desktop and both desktop applications, Mac OS and Windows, but now they have the new Evernote 10s out, and on Mac OS and Windows, as well as on iPad OS, iOS, and Android, which is still seemingly scaling out. But that was certainly a big story in the space this year. I feel like Notion had a breakout year. They have done a lot to take up market share in that space, although I don't consider them the same product as Evernote in the note-taking space. They still do handle note-taking in that sense, and they are now in private beta with regard to their API, which I think is another one of those big, huge kind of monumental moments in the productivity space that we now have. Finally, right? every Notion user says, right? But we've also had some breakouts from the space of Roam Research. We've had Obsidian. We've had a lot of people jump into the market to fill the gap that Evernote seemingly has left because of their having to step back and do development. So I feel like there have been a lot of really cool, interesting new entrants into the market because of that, and I'm really excited to see that. I also see the advance of Electron, the Electron framework, becoming kind of like an across the board option for a lot of these tech companies. If you think just from like Slack to Spotify to now Evernote, everybody seems to be going forward using Electron. Not everybody, but a lot are using that. And there are some drawbacks, obviously, to using an Electron JS framework. But at the same time, it allows them to be able to iterate so much faster. There's a balancing act there. And I just, for all of us in the space who are using these technologies, like I now have like 6 or 7 Electron apps sitting on my system, and they're heavy. I mean, they're pretty, big applications that are sitting both on the Mac OS and on Windows. They're big packages to be running all the time. And so it's something to just keep in mind that we have this kind of movement in the market. What do you say to that, Jay? You're the developer. I'm not. So
less Electron apps, please. I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing now that I wish would get resolved is we have some big companies that are trying to consolidate all of their products into one and even create new products because of that. I'm looking at you, Dropbox. No one wanted a password manager from you this year. What we wanted was a thinner application. Like that's it. It's just that simple. I think companies are trying to inch themselves into whatever business is left in the space. And what's happening, as you've mentioned, is it's creating a vacuum that a lot of people can't afford to live in. It's like, hey, I can't afford, $150 for all of the great things Dropbox. It's just not going to happen. My business isn't that big. My personal account isn't that big. So what we choose to do then is we say, okay, I'm going to spend a lot of money on one thing and I'm going to make that my big deal. And this is where I was dreading this conversation because I knew the words Roam Research. I knew the phrases, I knew that was going to come in. Let's be clear. No one here is doing anything new. They're just doing the same old thing in a different way. As they would even say, Zettelkasten, it is not a thing that came out in 2020. It came out in like a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it actually was born out of the early 1900s, maybe even older than that. There are some bottom up, serve you as you need it and as soon as you need it systems that came from the Noguchi filing system in the early 1900s as well. All of these tools are just reskinning old practices and presenting them in a new format thanks to the ease of development with things such as Electron, with things such as a lot of the progressive web apps, the React Native frameworks that are out there. You're now able to say, let me apply this old system in a new way with a new UI that's easier to use, and then I can dump a ton of money into marketing. A lot of this is marketing money. A lot of this is marketing power. It is not the best product that wins anymore. It is the product that can market themselves best wins. And I feel like this is what's happening in this system, to where Notion was able to move into a vacuum that Evernote left while they were cleaning house and doing things. Notion had the marketing power behind them. And as people asked for tools like, hey, we want an API. Yeah, don't worry, it's coming. Yeah, we really want an API. Don't worry, it's coming. There were other companies out there that said, we can do what Notion is doing and provide an API, or we can give you the native first experience. I think We have a link to the Mac Stories, like best apps of 2020. I forgot what the one they're super fascinated about now is, but even that application is the same idea. It is, we're going to give you this block system, Craft. That's what it's called.
Oh, crap. Yeah.
We're going to give you this block system, but we're going to give you the advantage of it being a native application. So it's going to run faster than all the Electron apps. Take your poison. It's all the same. You're doing the same thing no matter what. And don't at me. I don't care about your application. For those that want to know what applications I'm using, too bad you can't. Can we just agree that we're all doing the same thing now? That we're just putting a different name on it at this point?
And so that everybody has an idea, Zettelkasten is a knowledge management methodology with some note taking associated with it, which is 16th century technology, right? So we're not. It's right to your point, Jay. It's nothing's new there. But I think that what we're seeing though is both a market that had an opportunity and people trying to take market share in that space, and whether it's marketing or truly good development, both are going to be challenged by the big tier tech, right? Microsoft's OneNote is always going to be huge and the behemoth in the market because they provide it mostly for free as a part of their ecosystem. It works well enough, and so you have to not want OneNote in order to then want any other product. Same thing with Apple Notes, or even dare I say it, Google Keep, right? These are products that are given to you basically for free if you have that ecosystem. And while it may not be the right tool for you, you are likely to use it, or baling wire and duct tape it together to make it work for you because it's free and it's just a part of the system. Apple Notes is very competent as a note-taking tool, so why do you need something else? A lot of people want the complexity to be able to procrastinate from doing what they should be doing, which is getting actual work done. So they go, oh yeah, I've got to get Obsidian up and running because my life is going to be so much better when I jump into my system and develop it out. When in reality is that if you had your system in Evernote or OneNote or otherwise, you're literally wasting time to switch gears into another tool in order to do that. Now, for some people, that's going to be a good thing. Some it's not going to be so much. Augusto?
And I agree. And that's from the productivity perspective, that is really, really important to understand that cost. Fine, if you want to fiddle and play and that's what you do, great. Install one every other week and that's fine. But if what you're really looking is that productive component, I always tell people the really productive people rarely change their system, rarely move out of the thing. Why? Because the act of moving, it's ridiculously ineffective. I sometime during 2020, why? Because it's 2020, not really because I needed the collaboration component, I move out of OmniFocus to something else. And the move is, or was, one of the most ineffective weeks that I have, because I needed to pull from a piece of software that I've been using since the inception of the piece of software to something new that works in a different way, that now there were people adding stuff in there that I didn't know how to corral to a corner so I could process them, but I needed that kind of interaction because things have changed. So all these things and different ways to present the same tool are great if you really have a reason to move in that direction. If their reality has changed to the point that current reality with current tools will be significantly improved with new reality with new tools. The problem is that most people change the tool hoping that will change the reality. No. Let's wait until the reality change and then try to play with those tools. Other than that, stay on whatever tool it is.
Yeah.
One of the things that I tell my coaching clients, like when they ask me about productivity stuff, I often tell them an app is not stopping you. Like at this point, like if you're coming to me, you understand that you have a problem. Let's remove apps from the equation. And I mean, you mentioned earlier using bale wire and duct tape. I mean, notebooks do exist. Like we can move up the technological ladder just a little bit, but I do think that I'm happy to see that the productivity space is ever booming as it has been, but I have to be worried about the backlash there of that we're going to have a bunch of people that, for the lack of a better phrase, are productivity professionals, or in my what I call them, productivity app pill pushers. Basically, like we're going to talk about this product because they have the marketing budget behind it to give us free accounts, give us free credit, so we will try it because it's going to garner clicks and views for us so that we can talk about it. And once their funding runs out, we're going to move on to the next service that will do the exact same thing. And we will continue to rinse and repeat this process until the end of perpetuity, I guess.
Yeah, well, we currently see that with regard to the movement around note-taking space, right? A lot of people left Evernote. They went to Asana has their own program. So people, some of those Evernote certified consultants went to Asana. They became Asana pros. They went to Notion. They became, Notion ambassadors and excited about pushing Notion. We'll see that market happen. I don't believe that it's a bad for actually the productivity space. I think it's actually really good because ultimately what it does is it teaches people in the productivity space to be skeptical of the tools they're using, and we should have always been that way, and so I think we are continuing to see a little bit of this churn. Hopefully VCs and ACs start to fund things that actually have the capability of being successful in the market because it's truly doing something new and innovative, and that will help to kind of clean up some of that market. We keep seeing these boom bust cycles in productivity tech specifically because there are people out there who are very passionate about what they believe they're building, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean there's funding behind it. They're just building it for the sake of it, and they're hoping that people gather around them and fund them. And many times that means they're doing that on a freemium model or otherwise. And I'm wondering if that will help us kind of clean some of these pieces in the market up. Saying like, okay, well, if we really focus on building a product that has a good business model, then no matter what, it can survive for maybe the 1,500 people who are going to use it, but they're going to love using it versus having 10 million users using it for some partial free freemium model, and then that collapsing and everybody being like, oh gosh, now I've got to go scramble to get to another tool because this tool that was actually doing something really cool didn't have a strong business model or foundation underneath it.
And we saw this happen a lot with the movement of more applications to the subscription model. And I think that kind of the news that Apple was creating this small business program, to the contrary of the millionaires that are very upset that they will not be included. I think that is a good move for the productivity space as a whole, because it's going to give more creators the ability to create without having to think as much about their bottom line. 15% to a lot of people doesn't seem like a lot. And I think they said that the difference in how much you make is about a 20% difference. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of that difference. There is a few dollars on an annual subscription. I've seen more and more apps now, instead of being $20 a year, dropping down to like $10, $11, $12 a year. And because they're able to do so, they're going in and doing more.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Jamie's noting here in the chat that he's calling it the best productivity application is what makes you productive. But moving from one application to another is the worst experience, as Augusto pointed out. Importing data from one app to another takes time, even though the data is stored in almost the same format, usually Markdown. I couldn't disagree with that, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Because of time, we have a couple of best of app articles that we're going to put into the show notes. So if you guys want to check those out, the Fast Company article that we'll put a link to, the 15 best productivity apps of 2020, there were apps on here that I had not heard of before, which was both useful and interesting to me, but also made me think, well, how is that one of the best productivity apps of 2020 if I've never heard of it and I pay attention to the market? So I was a little skeptical of the title, but I was also really intrigued by some of them that were on the list. So some of you may want to check those out. And if you're into playing with tools for leisure, not to change, but for just leisure like I do, I like to play with the tools and not actually use them. You can go ahead and check those out. But there's some really interesting ones on there. Hey ends up being on there. Microsoft Edge, of course, moved to the Chrome based Chromium project, and so now Chrome or Chromium now is this big chunk of the internet because Chrome, Opera, Microsoft Edge, you name it, all are kind of running on Chromium, with really Firefox and Safari being the only other two challengers in that market that I'm aware of. But Brave is Chromium based. A lot of these are Chromium based. So with that, we are going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back for our headlines of the week. And so thank you, gentlemen, for this conversation on the best of 2020. This has been a lot of fun, but let's move on through to the other side with our stories of the week. So let's take a break and hear from our sponsor this week.
Did you know half of small businesses don't have websites and half don't make it past 1 year in business? Are these stats correlated? We're not sure, but we think you should have a website. W3C Web Services provides affordable managed WordPress website hosting along with VPS, domain name registration, and other small business-focused services. For listeners of this podcast, you can book a free 30-minute digital marketing strategy session when you purchase a new hosting plan, $150 value. Once you purchase your new hosting plan, forward the receipt to support@w3cinc.com with the podcast title in the subject line of the email message, and we'll get you scheduled for your digital marketing strategy session. Head over to anythingbutidle.com/webhosting and get started with your small business website today. And now, back to your show.
Welcome back, everybody, to Anything But Idle. And we are now beyond the discussion of the news and review 2020 and moving from that into our actual news of the week. Last week, we did our holiday gift guide 2020. So you can go out there if you've got some last minute holiday gifts to buy, you can go ahead and check that out. But and so we didn't cover any stories last week, and so we've grouped them into this week so we can cover those items for you. And so starting off the top, again, in a little bit of an interesting turn of news, Google is doing something really interesting. Augusto, you want to explain to us what Google is doing?
Yes, Google. So let me start saying Google. It's also saying that they're developing their own processors for smartphones and Chromebooks. And I don't know if it make it to the list or not, but Microsoft also announced that they're doing that to which AMD and Intel, the stock price are not doing really, really good this week. Yeah. They're kind of suffering, let's say. But it is really interesting to see, that Google is developing their own chipset, that Microsoft may do the same based on the ARM that Apple did. And what's that the future? After it took so many years to consolidate everybody into basically a compatible version of Intel or AMD chipset, now we are all going to spread again and going back to 1984 where each chipset was unique. But I guess, as we were discussing earlier with the cloud and the 60, that's what happened. But still, I think it's a really exciting news because as much as the use of the computer, at least for the foreseeable future, is not going to happen on that machine, having their own chipset will also allow them to do things that are going to be really interesting and powerful. So for one, I am really excited about that.
Yeah, so that everybody is aware, we'll probably be mentioning this in future episodes, but in essence, they're trying to develop their own system on a chip. The SoC is codenamed Whitechapel. So if you hear us talking about Whitechapel in the future, I'll try to remind us all what that means. But it is this new project that they're working on, and we'll see what happens. Next up, Gmail is going to allow you to edit Office documents directly from email attachments.
Finally. That's all that I'm going to say about that news. Finally,
this is really fascinating to me though, because before you would open up an email and it would launch in that preview pane, that overlay that would give you a view of the document. If it was whether it was Google, whether it was a Microsoft Word document or a PDF or otherwise, you'd kind of get that view, and then you could open it up into its own tab or window and then go into an editing mode. Now it's allowing you to do that directly in the email itself. And that provides one less kind of step away from getting something done. I don't see myself necessarily wanting to do that, but I can see how that's useful for a lot of people. I get it. I'm not gonna end up using this feature a lot, but I'm appreciative of them wanting to help those users.
I mean, I'm just glad making mail merges will be easier now.
No, I think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be at your day-to-day email, but I think it is going to be really useful, especially on low power on mobile devices.
Yes. And so this is going to be able to use the Docs editor in email to open up Microsoft Office files, which are Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. So again, matching up to Google Docs, Google Slides, and Google Sheets. So great. Continuing the Google news, we've got some big news out of Google. They acquired Cloud Ready OS, which was owned by Neverware. Now Google owns them. And so Augusto.
So I've been jumping up and down all week with this news. One of the devices I have is an old Surface Pro who died, and the hard drive died, and it's not fixable. So I installed Neverware long time ago, and contrary to every prediction that all the people I discussed before I installed that machine was going to die a week later. Okay, the thing is still running in an micro SD is what runs everything, and you cannot know that that's what it runs, and it works incredibly well. And I am so excited that Google acquired that and has plans to make this an officially offering, to add the store to allow me to install software and other things. So I have installed Neverware for clients in more machines than what I want to admit, and I'm really, really excited for Google to do this.
Yes.
As we mentioned before, more and more computing not on the device that you're actually holding in your hand. I mean, this is it, and this is where I would not be surprised if Microsoft doesn't make a similar move next year. That's luckily you'll have to bring me on next year to confirm or deny that claim, because I don't talk about it on any other shows I do. So we'll see what happens next year for Microsoft.
Yeah, and I think that Cloud Ready OS, which allows you to, in essence, install a variant of Chrome OS onto almost any device, that's going to now give you, before you could not use the Google Play Store. That was one of the limitations of Cloud Ready OS, because it wasn't allowed by Google. Now, because Google owns it, you'll be now able to run Android applications on those devices, which just opens up the field. I think it's a really great acquisition on Google's part, and it helps to bring together a whole host of devices that are sitting around people's homes that can now be given new life. And I think this is really great for the environment. This is great for our productivity, because there are probably some devices out there that you actually liked using at some point, and the only thing limiting you was the fact that it wasn't getting security updates, or that the software itself, the OS itself, was outpaced by the hardware. And now we can go ahead and bring those back into use. And I know I have a lot of devices hanging around that I'd like to start toying with and bringing back to life. I have a laptop I call Bertha, and she is a wonderful big old thing. And I'm wondering if Cloud Ready will now install on her nicely.
Yeah, I'm curious if that tablet PC will run CloudOS, but I will be able to report back.
All right, let's move on through. We have some news out of Cydia, which is talk to me about Cydia and what Cydia is for folks, and what their conflict is with Apple.
So Cydia, before you could install apps on the iPhone, and people may not remember that the iPhone was not to be able to install apps on his initial version. You could jailbreak the phone, install Cydia and the applications, and then Apple came with the Apple Store and invented the concept. That's what they do. And then now Cydia is coming back and suing Apple for their practices and bringing a lawsuit that asking Apple to allow them to install their store in a legal way that Apple obviously has not been friendly or for the last 13 years. So we will need to see what happening there. I am in the particulars that in the same way that Microsoft has its store and Google has its store, Apple should have the same right to have their store and decide who plays and who doesn't play. So.
I think, well, first of all, I forgot Cydia existed, so I'm sorry, Cydia, for that. I'm just burning all the bridges today. But the other side of this is on antitrust grounds is hilarious, because what they're saying is we can't develop for the Apple ecosystem, when the argument is still the Apple ecosystem isn't the largest market. Profit-wise, it might be, but ultimately it's not. I feel like this is... Cydia finally got tired of being Sherlock to death. I will say Apple did the right thing by not buying Cydia for their app store and then eventually just turning it into this thing where they said, okay, Cydia, you keep developing and we'll keep just taking the best and brightest apps that you have and turning them into system-wide features. Sadly, that's the nature of the beast on this one. I don't think that Cydia is going to win this fight, especially since they were violating the terms of service from Apple in order to do what they were doing. So at that point, yeah, sorry, you're just going to have to create an Android store and hope that that works.
But not only that, it is, as you said, yes, it's true that that is happening, but that is happening with Apple. That is happening with Microsoft. That has been the story of software for the years of the years. I mean, there's 2 story downs where we are going to mock Samsung exactly for that you described, and I'm happy to bring that coming back as soon as we get to Samsung.
You're right. You're 100% right. I think that this is a timing issue. This is Apple's in court over the Epic issue. Facebook is dealing with antitrust stuff. Google's dealing with antitrust stuff. If Cydia was going to ever win this lawsuit, now would be when it happens. I think I would have waited to see what the results of those other lawsuits are, but maybe Cydia doesn't have that kind of time available to them. So they're jumping on. Maybe they get a win just with all of the other stuff happening. Maybe they settle out of court. I don't know. But what I do know is the Cydia bringing this up is kind of interesting, but ultimately not something that anyone would expect to actually have success on.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in Sherman antitrust law and in antitrust law generally, but I find what is the likely outcome here is a settlement, and Cydia will have a pretty good payday in that case. And that's really their goal, right? It's just like these patent trolls. They're out there to be able to make a dollar off of an opportunity. At the same time, all of the other app stores that are out there, whether that be Samsung, Android and Google's Play Store with Microsoft Store, you can still install applications outside of that system. It's not easy on, say, Android, but you can do it. It's trivial in terms of, but the average person is not necessarily going to know how to do those things. And but with Apple, it's very, very difficult. And
but it is possible.
It is possible. It is possible, but it's very difficult. And with getting that whole, like, finding out what an IPA is, right, to getting it installed onto the Apple system, and that's a bit of a higher level, higher user level experience type activity that is fairly easy and common with other users on other platforms. And I wonder if in this particular case it's going to force Apple's hand to allow that to happen, and what's going to happen in global courts, because remember that Apple's arguments in the United States are very, very different than Apple's arguments are going to be in Ireland with GDPR, and with Australia and their new GDPR-like rules and regulations, and with other countries that are a little bit more authoritarian, like China and Russia and otherwise. So I'm wondering whether this is going to push them a little bit in opening up the system. I don't think so. I'm curious if it will. I don't think it will. And I think the reason for that is that they've been pushing this privacy and security brand for a long time. And there is actually a value to iOS users, well, Apple users generally, in having their ecosystem locked down in the way that Apple does it. And so I'm really curious as to whether or not there is a value there that will be retained in their arguments against this lawsuit. I think they'll ultimately win the broader argument, but I think they'll probably settle, and there'll be some minor changes here that will be considered wins for the user who wants interoperability and who wants their portability of data. Because that's the one thing I have a problem with, is that once you put your data into the Apple ecosystem, it's really difficult to get that data out in a seamless, transferable way. You've got to really do that in a manual process. And like with Google Photos, it's tough when you have terabytes and terabytes of data in a system and you're trying to get that out. And gosh, iCloud's photo system, like, I don't even understand how the database sees an album, better yet, how to get it out of the system. And so, those are things that I think could be a good conversation to be had on the user level that'll push them in that regard. Okay, moving right along to family sharing in the Apple ecosystem. Augusto?
As a person who have 2 kids and a wife and a bunch of devices, I'm so grateful for this, that we can now share all this, and the family sharing is working, and in some of the apps is working great. And so I am really, really grateful that this feature is there, and it is going to make life easy for people who have all this. And they make it right, where not every application need to apply to this. I think they make it right when they allow the developer to decide if it's fair for them or not to do it. And I respect each developer on that decision. But I have already applications that has come with the notification saying, now you have this available to you and you can start using it now.
I definitely agree that too bad I'm the only major tech nerd in my family. So most of the subscriptions that I have are just for me and me only. But I do agree that I think that this is going to be beneficial for some folks out there. And I look forward to seeing what comes out of this, not just from the perspective of the apps now being able to make, more decisions. But as you mentioned earlier, Ray, the idea of there being a win behind the win, it not being about, oh, now you can have an entire family locked into a platform, into an idea. It is now Apple is saying, we're going to give a little bit more ability for the developer to make decisions, instead of saying, no, you have to do it this way. I think as long as they continue to do that, they're going to continue to skate past some of these antitrust issues that are popping up, because at the end of the day, they can go, but the developer has a choice. We're giving the developer options. We're giving them more and more options every single year. It's on the developer. It's not necessarily on us as the platform.
Yeah, and I think they can make a strong argument that there's less consumer harm, I suppose, and then greater marketplace innovation because of that, right? If you give the developer more tools in their toolkit to be able to make those choices. All right.
I mean, a good example of that was when my daughter was born. If I wanted to subscribe for all the baby health tracking stuff, I could. But at the time, 2 years ago, if my wife wanted to as well, we had to pay double. So like now you can have these collaborative events around like neonatal care and all those things. Just super excited for what technology will advance because of this.
Oh, as a person who have two kids, that's, my youngest now is getting to the point that he wants to play the same thing. So it used to be exactly that. You buy the game and buy the game again and buy the game again. Now it's a family game. It's awesome.
Yeah, there are all kinds of use cases for this. I see the fitness trainer who wants to be able to help their client with that kind of circumstance. I see coaches and consultants who are helping in other regards, being able to share those kinds of things.
Family gym memberships.
Yeah, there you go.
Especially now, in which gym memberships are slowly evaporating. I think that this is a great time to launch something like this.
Yeah, virtual fitness programs, all those kinds of things are really. I just really think that there's a greater opportunity here now for developers in that space. Okay, we have reached the point where we now mock Samsung. Go for it, Augusto.
So 3 months after Samsung make all this included with Galaxy, with a picture of the power supply, Samsung has plans now to ditch their adapter. And, not that it wasn't unexpected, okay? As soon as they do the mock, I say, oh, they're going to trip into this faster than what you can say power supply. But it is really fun to see and remind some of my Galaxy owner friends who send me the messages about and the image, and now replying back and say, so what you were saying about your next Samsung? So
there's a great podcaster by the name of Justin Robert Young that talks about this a lot in the politics world, where he says it doesn't matter what you said, what matters is what you're saying. And this is very much the case. When Samsung was saying, oh, but we have a power brick included, that was because Apple had just said, oh, we're getting rid of ours. I'm sure what happened was there was a conversation that was held between Samsung and Apple, because they do talk to each other. And they said, oh, by the way, how much money did you save getting rid of that power brick? And then afterwards, the conversation was now, hey, guess what? We need to think about the environment too. We need to take care of e-waste. And ultimately, we need to pad our bottom line by getting rid of all of these power adapters.
That is the theory one, and I agree with you. Theory two is they are looking what is coming law-wise in Europe and say, if we don't get rid of this thing, we're going to be buying, where in the near future, because the Europe want to consolidate all these things, we are going to get in trouble. We need to get rid out of this as soon as possible. So.
And this sounds like it'll be on the new Galaxy S21, Galaxy S21 Plus, and the Galaxy S21 Ultra. So those models are the ones that are currently being noted as missing the adapters in their boxes that'll be going out. So it'll be interesting. I think the argument that this is somehow environmental is nonsense. But I think ultimately the cost savings is probably made up for in new profit, because you have a whole lot of post-purchase, product market out there that are selling these aftermarket adapters and so on and so forth. So I bet you that Anker and many of these other companies had a conversation with Samsung and Apple about, hey, we can create me or my certified adapters also, and people can pay a heck of a lot more for those because they're fancier, and you don't have to produce them. We'll make money, you'll make money, and so I'd be curious to see what those back of the office agreements are between those companies in terms of their marketing connections.
Well, I'm sure they're all done in the name of the environment.
It was a race to the bottom. I mean, the fact that you could go to any gas station and buy a charger for $2, like, I think every company kind of saw the writing on the wall of like, okay, you can either get out and save money on production, or we can at least start kind of reducing the amount of population in this space, so that some of the areas where this is the main thing that we do cannot continue to drive their prices lower and lower, and then thus the quality of the product lower.
Yeah, plus Apple's going to wireless charging with their devices, and I think that there's probably an argument that the phone market can do without those cables more and more, where you can, yep, there you go, you do a little Qi charging pad, excuse me, and being able to, throw your Apple AirPods onto your phone and it charges from the phone and so on and so forth. You get a lot more capability there that you need less adapters, hopefully. So I see there being an opportunity there for them to be able to reduce the number of adapters. But I know for myself, I've tried to reduce the number of adapters I've had in my own world, but I'm not everybody. I'm probably in the minority where trying to have the fewest things to travel with, because once upon a time I did travel for work. And
what is this travel thing you speak
I
of?
know it seems so odd. It seems quaint. And so, but we'll go back to that in some way, shape, or form post COVID. And I want to be able to travel nimbly, and that requires me to have fewer devices. I think that a lot of people, though, continue to want to have those things. And so Apple has, as per my understanding, is the Apple sales, a lot of people actually did buy the additional adapter for the extra $30, $40 or whatever it costs. So it's probably a win-win for them, which is that they can now cost justify removing the adapters because they can make more money in people purchasing them aftermarket. So, okay, moving along to some Google news. Augusto, since you're the Todoist user among us, what's going on with Todoist?
Well, Todoist has been doing incredible amount of things this year, and I know we run out of time, but actually for me is the productivity app on 2020. They did an incredible development in all ways, shape, or forms and things. But one of the things they did is they finally they integrated early with the lady with the big A, and now they're integrating with the big G. So you can talk to these devices and tell them to add, and even if you do it properly, you can add due dates, priorities, and categories, and everything else. So it is really a well done job that they are doing, integrating these devices that we all have around. It is magical to really be walking to the house when you think about the thing and say, "Hey, Big G, do this for me," and have it on your device when you get there. So I will celebrate each one of these integrations when they come.
Yeah, earlier this year, we had more and more tools. I mean, prior to 2020, I'd used IFT for connecting a lot of these services to my Google Assistant, and that way I could say, "Okay, Big G," and execute. Now, more and more of these tools are allowing us to be able to integrate directly. Remember, the Milk added it earlier this year, and that's my task manager of choice. And now we're seeing these direct integrations. And I think that's actually really, really both powerful, but also it gives us greater control over our productivity systems when we don't have to depend upon a third party to trigger and create the thing for us, whether that's checking an item off, adding a note to our system, creating a new task, those kinds of things. It's really, really powerful when we have that kind of direct integration, because there's just one less thing to fail, right? It's just reducing the number of parts.
Yeah, and I mean, once upon a time, I was a Todoist grandmaster, but nowadays, I don't know. They might have taken that title away from me. Honestly, Todoist, I will definitely say, in terms of bringing kind of their app to the next level, where a lot of apps were trying to like catch up or like include somehow wiki linking and backlinking into things. Like, I feel like Todoist has just kind of doubled down and said, we're going to continue to do our thing. And the other thing is, Augusto, I will buy a Google Home if I can call it Big G. Because I mean, that is definitely like the coolest thing I've heard today. Is like, okay, Big G, let's do this. And I'm like, I wonder if I can do that with my HomePods.
We've chosen Madame A, Big G, and just to be able to not have it execute for folks. Last week I think one of our panelists, I think Dr. Buck, had actually said the phrase, and I had to mute it out in post production so that people don't all over the world get their devices triggered. So
no one can get the Apple canisters to work because it's always, no, I didn't call you. Why are you at? No, stop it! Stop it! Stop it!
I'm going to say nothing to that comment, but I'm going to say to the comment prior. that one of the things that I think is true. You could do it with IFT, and I have done it like that before. But for a lot of people, the idea of getting to IFT to connect the two devices, that now gets to the geeky side of the world where they may not even try it, while they make these direct connections, is something that more and more people is willing to try, and more people then is able to integrate with their platforms.
Let's give them credit, because I mean, Apple launched their widget platform, and I think a lot of people were not expecting all of the TikTokers out there, including the Widget Smith creator David_Smith himself, of like, whoa, wait, what's happening? Why is my app the number one app? Oh, because the TikTok generation has found this total nerd tool that I created just for the sake of being able to play with this new technology. I believe there's going to be some people that are like, yeah, I used to do this from my phone, and then all of a sudden their kid's going to say, hey, Big G, add this to Todoist, or add this to Grandpa's Todoist, or add this to Mom's Todoist, and they're going to be like, wait, you can do that? I would definitely give them credit. Just being able to do it in some cases is enough to get that win.
I agree with you. We installed the Madame A on my parents, and it is fun because my mother have it in Spanish, my father have it in English, because he decided he wasn't going to talk to the lady in Spanish. And then it is hysterical to see them fight with the device when the device decides not to understand them. Okay, it is really hysterical to see.
All right, we've got one more story in our stories of the week before we go into our new tools this week. Augusto, what's our final story?
Oh, Bic acquires the Rocketbook. So we close to a notepad, but now the leading brand of reusable notebooks. As you are showing on the screen, Jay, it's going to be a brand in the US.
Yes. So the French-based Bic has the one company we know for pens mostly, the ubiquitous Bic pens, has bought Rocketbook, and as many of you who have listened to me here on Anything But Idle or any of my other podcasts or otherwise know how much I love the Rocketbook line of smart notebooks. And so I think this is a really great choice for them to pick up a company that is a successful market product. I think they started on Kickstarter. I think they were a Kickstarter based project, and just to see a product in the productivity space go from a little Kickstarter that was very successful, and then launched multiple new products and ultimately get purchased by a major global mainstay, I think is just a really great success in our space. And I'm glad to see it happen. And I hope that the folks at Rocketbook are pleased with it. The Rocketbook also produces one of my other all-time favorite products. I don't have it in arm's reach, but they have the little Rocketbook, what are they called? The little whiteboard stickers that you put them on the corners of the rocket of a whiteboard, and it allows you to be able to stream with your phone real-time whiteboard. And you can also take captures of those screen shares and share them the same way you do Rocketbook notebook pages. And the Rocketbook Beacon is what it is. The Rocketbook Beacon is such a great product. $15, great stocking stuffer if you can still get one in time for the holidays. But the Rocketbook Beacon, I think, is one of the coolest freaking technologies. You just take the Rocketbook app and you point it at the screen where the four corners are, and now you have your entire team, your entire family, if you're doing a family brainstorming, now capable of seeing it wherever you are from a single link. Very, very cool technology. It kind of does what Google Jamboard does and other tools like that allow you to whiteboard in real time, but you're actually writing on a physical screen for, the Jamboard in real life is like what, $1,500, $2,000. It's a pricey piece of technology, and of course Google Jamboard has a web application that's free, but the physical product's pretty pricey.
As the notebook, pen, and paper nerd that I am, the thing that excites me about this is Bic is a mass production story. I mean, in general, the whole idea of Bic pens, Bic razors, Bic anything is they can take a technology that used to cost $100 and turn it down to 5 cents. And when you can do that, when you have the power to do that with a product that was so innovative, like the Rocket Notebook, obviously they're not going to come in and all of a sudden Rocket Books are going to be $3 at Walmart. Like, that's just not going to happen in a single day. But what we will start to see is certain production techniques being applied to smart analog technology, which I know smart analog, like, oh, that sounds kind of creepy. But that idea and being able to do that will definitely reflect on the rest of the analog productivity space. I think we're going to see a bunch of better design technologies coming into notebook spaces, and it's going to cause a drop in some of the pricing, or the prices will stay the same and people's margins will increase, which is always a good thing too. But what we will see is better manufacturing and mass production across the map because of this, and because BIC is known for doing this in the industries that they've come into.
And that will be exactly interesting, because I remember when it's been a long time that I stopped using paper, but I remember the Levenger notebooks with the Circa thing. And when I think it was Office Max who got their cheaper version, I was hoping that was going to happen and was going to hit mass market, because they were a really incredible, customizable thing. So
You're thinking about the Staples Arc?
The Arc, yes. Yes, and it really was a significant difference between the Levenger version and the Arc. So I really hope you're right on that one. And now the Rocketbook turned into that commodity that everybody understand and everybody see, because I agree with you. It's an incredible technology, especially for the people who love paper.
And just so anybody who doesn't know, the thing about the Rocketbook for me is that it ties to a bunch of services, whether that be Google Drive, Evernote, OneNote, you name it, and maybe it's OneDrive. It's OneDrive instead of OneNote, one of those. And so it allows you to then tie the naming of the page that you're scanning to automation services because of that tie into the integration with those other services. So for example, when I write a note and I title it X, I can now in Evernote have that triggered and picked up by IFT or Zapier or any of the other automation tools to then do further things with that page, which really extends its capabilities. And that's where I think some of this automation is misunderstood or maybe not applied to really increase the functionality of it. The other thing that I really love is you can scan a page and execute it to an email. So it can send a PDF or JPEG to an email address. And in my case, I write notes in a weekly meeting, and that email then is executed to a group email address. And so everybody who's a part of that group email address gets that email, which is just a huge time saver for me, because I can outline all of the tasks and now everybody gets it. And I don't have to think about who is going to get that, that document, because as soon as I scan it, it gets executed off to the right people. So there's some really, really great pieces in Rocketbook, and I'm, again, like I said, I'm just wonderfully happy to see it land in a company where it makes sense. Like different than Slack inside of Salesforce. I clearly understand where Rocketbook fits into the BIC ecosystem, and I'm really looking forward to them expanding their market by doing so. That brings us to the closeout of our stories of the week and onto our segment, which is the new tools of the week. And so, as you all know, Augusto and I come across plenty of new personal productivity tools and services, all kinds of apps and whatnot, and we play with those tools and we enjoy learning about new tools. And so in New Tools of the Week, we each bring you a tool we think you might like. It doesn't have to necessarily be a new tool, but it's hopefully a new tool to you, and sometimes they're new tools to us. And we always invite our guests, panelists, to offer up a tool as well. And so let's get started with our tools this week. And so my first new tool this week is a tool called Gone. And this one actually happens to be an iOS application. And what I thought was really interesting about it when I first came across it is that what Gone does is in 24 hours, whatever tasks you put on it, they disappear, they delete. And so this is really, really fascinating to me that loss aversion can be used as a mechanism for you actually completing tasks in your system. And so they call it the ephemeral to-do list, appropriately titled such. It is very minimalist, and I think it's really interesting. You get to see how many tasks you tick off, how many were incomplete and therefore got deleted, and you can see this on a weekly schedule, so you get a little bit of data, quantification there. There are some notifications like, hey, by the way, this task is going to be deleted. A lot of people keep daily task lists, and they rewrite those task lists every day. And so I think there's an argument here that something like Gone can actually be pretty useful for some people. Maybe not for me. I like keeping my stuff around, but there is potentially a group of people where this would work. There's dark mode for those folks who are dark mode-ish, and that's it. It's a very, very simple application, Gone, and it's available on iOS and iPad as well as being on macOS. So that's my new tool this week. Augusto, what's your new tool this week?
Well, I tried Gone, put all my tasks in there, and 24 hours later, I was so refreshed knowing having nothing else.
Hopefully you accomplished a few of them.
No, not really. But well, let's talk about Momentum Dashboard. And Momentum is one application that you can integrate with Todoist. And what Momentum do is in the browser page, it will bring in the top corner, and you can hide it, your Todoist and the information, and you can select the different things. So if you are, especially for the clients that work in Chrome, that live in Chrome, or works in Chromebook, it is a great place to have it there. Don't need to open the application, can go and focus on what you are doing. I tend to recommend people create a category that you can, like a tag that you can reuse is what I'm working right now. Because what happened to many of us is we get so many interruptions that we tend to forget what we were working 5 minutes ago. And this is where Momentum do an incredible thing, because allows you to select that, and that is what is. And every time you get distracted, you will come back to your browser and see these were the one or the two things I was working on, and that bring an incredible amount of power.
So it is a Chrome extension. It looks like it's a free Chrome extension. And so it uses your new Chrome tab in order to be able to create this dashboard. Is that my understanding, Augusto?
That's correct.
What's the integration with Todoist? The tasks that you create are synchronized into Todoist, or vice versa?
You can see them on the corner, and you can select a particular task, or you can select a tag, so that way you can do things like what I was describing.
Fantastic. Wonderful. All right. Great new tool. And with that, Jay, what's your new tool this week?
So sadly, this isn't a new tool to me, but I'm hoping that I can share it with all of the listeners and watchers. It's called Hook, and you can find it at hookproductivity.com. It is a context-sensitive window that allows you to link things together or hook them together. So here's always the example suggestion here. If you have a Word document that you have a paper that you're writing, and you want to connect all of your research materials to that paper, what you would do is that paper itself would have its own hook link that you would copy. And then as you go through those pages, you would also hook those research pages to that research paper, so that when you're thinking back to yourself, what was that one thing I was talking about in like paragraph 3? Well, you just have to hit whatever your hook activator command is. Mine is Shift Command Space. And I have a list of all of the documents that I've hooked to that paper. And this is a Mac-only app. To my knowledge, I have heard some rumblings about some iOS integrations, but nothing concrete on that yet. But I have grown to require this in almost everything that I do now. Mostly because I do a lot of things, and sometimes the things overlap. And when they do, I want to be able to figure it out. I've also been told there's a lot of new features coming up, so keep an eye out for this hook at hookproductivity.com.
Fantastic. Wonderful. And with that, that is our new tools of the week. That is a new tool to me, Jay, and I'm looking forward to playing.
Same here.
You will absolutely fall in love with this tool. It's one of those things that now I don't. It replaced a bookmarking, like the entire bookmarking suite of my thing, because I don't think in terms of add this to my bookmark. It's add this to the things that I was doing as I was doing this thing, so that when I try to remember in my goofy ADHD brain, I can go, oh, what was that one thing I was doing here? I went here and then it was something else. So then I just go back to where I remember, hit the hook activator, and sure enough, there's the link sitting there waiting for me. And the fact that it can expand beyond the browser, and it can hook files, it can hook directories, it can hook locations on your Mac. It's so powerful and so wonderful, especially once you get past the idea of how do I connect these things?
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was exactly there where you got me. So I'm going to put a look into that, because that on my iPad will be fantastic.
Like I said, right now it's on Mac OS only, but I've been told that there's some work on an iOS companion.
Fantastic. And with that, we just have an announcement, and then we're going to close out. The one announcement I wanted to make is folks have probably come into contact with Dr. Frank Buck on the show in the past, and he's been a panelist, and he joins me on Productivity Book Group to review books and all kinds of other fun things. He is in the nomination running currently for the third time in a row for the Global Guru's Top 30 Time Management Professionals for, I'm presuming, 2021, because I think he was 19 and 20, and I think he's going for 2021. So if you guys want to support Dr. Buck, go out there and find globalgurus.org, look for the time management category, and you can go ahead and vote for him. So it's pretty easy to go ahead and log in and vote for him. And so go give some love to Dr. Buck and that. So with that, that brings us to the end of the show. And with that, I just wanted to thank Jay Miller for joining us here today. Jay, how can folks stay in touch with you and keep up to date with regard to your work?
So yeah, this has been a blast. I am super excited. I got to wrap up the year with y'all. If you want to learn more about the stuff that I do, the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 podcasts I'm running at any given time, kjoymiller.com. You can also reach me on social, most of the socials, except for all the ones that are owned by Facebook, at kjoymiller is where you can find me there. And yeah, anytime you want to talk productivity or anti-productivity, give me a call.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us here on Anything But Idle, Jay.
We will.
All right. So with that, just very, very quickly, if you noted a story that we missed this week, feel free to go ahead and let us know. You can find us at Anything But Idle on Twitter. Our DMs are open. You can also find us at anythingbutidle.com and fill out the contact form there on the page, and you could just let us know. You can subscribe to Anything But Idle at anythingbutidle.com/subscribe, and you'll find our show notes, links to all the stories that we had this week, text transcript that we have for you to be able to both read on the page as well as download in PDF. If this is your first time watching the live stream, please feel free to click the thumbs up icon, as well as subscribe to the channel. That'll notify you when we do future weekly live streams like this. If you're listening to the podcast, feel free to keep listening to the podcast. If you are listening to the podcast and you're not a subscriber, feel free to hit the subscribe tab at anythingbutidle.com, and you can learn how to subscribe in your favorite podcast app. And there are also options for you to be able to leave reviews in both Apple Podcasts as well as Stitcher, and those help us make new personal productivity friends. And so thank you for leaving those reviews for us. And so with that, thank you, Augusto Pinaud, for joining me here this and every week for Anything But Idle.
Thank you. And for people celebrating Kwanzaa and celebrating Christmas and celebrating the holidays. This is obviously the show pre-holidays, so Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, and Happy Holidays, and looking forward to see you all or talk to you all or make you guys listen to us next week.
With that, see you all next time on Anything But Idle. Here's to your productive life.